Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure to be here with you all. I had 50 slides. I was going to talk very, very fast, but now there's only 2 of us, so I'm going to talk much slower. I guess the first thing, in keeping with the topic that we have this afternoon, business value of enterprise architecture, and I'd like to get a show of hands from you all. How many here think you can get business value with enterprise architecture? Could I see a show of hands? How many think you cannot? How many of you don't care? Well, it was pretty unanimous on the first part of the question, so I guess I'll continue on with what I was going to go ahead and say. So moving to the next part of this, starting out in a more general nature and a more general flavor, enterprise architecture, from where I have been and where I have seen it, has been profound and it has been compelling. If you look at my role and my time in the Department of Defense, it was about creating the desired effect. We heard the Joint Forces Command approach before, but when I was serving as the Chief Architect for the Department of Air Force and then as the Deputy CIO, it really became not only a relevant part, but the essential and critical part of what we were doing, not only at the confidential, secret, top secret, but at the SAPSAR level in creating how we were going to go forward. But beyond that, if you look at enterprise architecture and you look at it from a government agency, a federal agency perspective, or Department of Defense, we have talked for many, many years about how we're going to enable information sharing across organizations, domains, and coalitions. And when you listened to Randy earlier this morning on the maturity model, how you do that is by starting to do federation. You do that by not the big bang approach that we tried 20 years ago, where we all just developed baseline architectures till the cows came home, and we never really got into the target architectures. And because we didn't have subsets, we weren't seeing those values, both from a business or mission perspective, across the spectrum. But moving down, you really look at enterprise architecture from the textbook perspective, and then you actually get in the CIO role, where I was in it for a long time, where you actually have an Exhibit 53 that many of you are very familiar with, the Exhibit 300. We're going through the JSIDS process, where people are really starting to look at comparable programs, comparable projects, and utilizing enterprise architecture in order to create the trade space. So in Department of Defense, for example, where you have 3 big circles, if you will, for the DoD Acquisition 5000. You have the planning and programming and budgeting and execution environment. And then you have the whole other part of what happens in there with the JSIDS. Every single one of those require DODAF artifacts, DODAF viewpoints in order to get through the process. And in fact, now before we even start the POM process in DoD, we do months of enterprise architecture preparation to the senior leaders before we even start doing the POM build for FY12, coming up FY14. That's the way the process works now. You don't see a lot of it because most of it's classified and it is behind the doors. But it is about reducing overlap, conflict, and duplication. If you have something that is a joint thread, then you have a JCB, or a functional capabilities bar within the Pentagon, championed out of the J8, and they drive it down that way. Same way in Department of Homeland Security when I was working there. It is also to remove IT complexity, help increase return on investment. And I want to come back to that in a few minutes, because I've spent many, many years on this ROI of VA, and it's not always a textbook example or a textbook ROI or a textbook cost-effective analysis on deriving value and deriving mission effectiveness. But you can see the other ones that I have on the slide there. So moving on, we've always talked about direct benefits and indirect benefits, but at Accenture we work with clients across the globe, and it's both in the public and the private sector, helping them with their enterprise architecture initiatives, helping clients achieve high performance and delivering business value. And I'm going to show you a couple examples here in just a second. But through this experience, we have found that the benefits exist across the spectrum of tangible to intangible, and I have some of those listed here, and they reflect in a direct benefits 10 to 20, 30% cost reduction, indirect benefits 10 to 50% cost reduction, And for us in the federal government, we always were dealing with cost avoidance, because there isn't very much discretionary in every bit of the CPRIC process you go through, the POM process. There's very little discretionary there, so you have to actually say, okay, I'm going to give up this in order to start this new architecture effort that we need to bring forward. But there are savings, and there are inferred benefits, realized in time savings, and then the most important thing is the effect and the efficiency. Huge effects and huge efficiency in the enterprise architectures, and I've seen them all, and I've seen incredible productivity gains, and I'm going to give you a couple examples of those. I think, though, of note, before going to the next slide, while enterprise architectures are inherently fluid, the nature of the enterprise architecture to each agency is definitely different, because you have your own drivers and you have your own prior initiatives, no different in industry where you're going after some growth area, so you have an enterprise architecture to charge that. But where I've seen enterprise architecture extremely valuable in industry and commercial is when you get into mergers and acquisitions. Because you have a myriad of systems, you have a myriad of business processes across those companies. And those companies that have been able to document some of those key business processes, those systems that enable them, and the technologies that they use, they can see their way through to that merger and that acquisition. So if you look at how I view the world, from a business strategy, and if you're a Department of Defense or a federal agency, your mission strategy right up there at the top, because it always starts there. And you heard Randy talking about it earlier today, about they're putting the more onus on the business process owners. We had a raging debate back in the early 90s on whether the CIO should be the leader of the chief architect. It became a part of the scorecard for the CIO, and the chief architects ended up there. A couple of agencies tried to pull them out and make them in a transformation office or a modernization office, but it always seemed that they migrated back to the CIO, because if you look at the CIO responsibilities, it's that they will work with their business stakeholders, they will enable those business processes, and they will be the one that will champion that. But it doesn't leave the business owners out of that process, and the good part about it is they have to be accountable, because without them, as you well know, it won't happen. So getting into a couple of examples, I think before going to them, marathoning is something that I've done, and you've heard triathloning there for me. I've done 50 marathons, 10 ultra marathons, untold triathlons around the world, including Helsinki, and architecture is very much like marathoning. I'm not saying you have to be a marathoner in order to be a successful architect, but it's not easy. It's not a sprint, it's not a 100-meter dash, it's something that you evolve and take time. I remember at US Customs, we didn't just have success overnight. We had a long process to get there.